Hello, my dear viewers. I would like to welcome you to another video, which is again another reading from my book, uh, Judgment, The Last Trump, and the Fall of America. If your eyes are wide open and you have any thinking, like you look at things and you try to perceive them, you will notice that this title of this book is currently being fulfilled in America in a very striking way. It does not matter how many people perceive that, but it depends whether or not you do perceive it. In the Bible book of Daniel, chapter 12, it is said that in the time of the end, there will be great distress in the world. Such distress that man has never seen since the foundation of the world. Men will be worried and apprehensive of the things that are going to come upon the world. I just mixed that with what Jesus said in Luke chapter 21. And then he said, at that time, many who sleep in the dust of the earth are going to wake up. By implication, there is not so much that is people in the dust of the earth. It's just people that have not been considered anything in this world are going to begin to realize what is going on. And then it says some will eventually go into eternal life and some will go to eternal damnation, which means there are those who have not actually accepted God by believing in his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ. And then it says that those who are wise, they will instruct many to righteousness. At that time when that word was given to Daniel, it was told him, Daniel, cover it up and seal it, for it's for the time of the end. And we are in the time of the end. And then in Revelation chapter 22, I think beginning from verse 10, after almost giving out everything that God had given to John, which was more like a conclusion to the entire Bible, because John summarized the entire Bible right from Genesis 1, he said, oh, it is written, let him who is wicked continue to be wicked. Let him who is vile continue to be vile. Now, that's one thing you have to understand, that every human being on this planet is free to accept or not to accept God. And God cannot force himself upon anybody. And no religious group should try to force God on anybody. Those who want to be wicked, God is saying, okay, fine. You can continue to be wicked. Those who are vile, you can continue to be vile. But then he also says, let those who are holy continue to be holy, and let those who do right continue to do right. You can judge for yourself. Are you vile? Are you wicked? Well, God is not forcing you to turn, but he invites you to turn if you want to. It's free. You are free. And then if you are holy and righteous, I would admonish you to continue like that. Continue to be holy. Continue to be righteous. Now, I am not going to be reading my entire book, but the sections that I'm reading pertains to answering the question, is America a Christian nation? Now, many Americans and many people around the world perceive or believe that America is a Christian nation. But in a biblical sense, is that true? Now, one of the reasons that motivated me to write this book was my perception in the year 2000 to 2003. Having just entered the US, I observed the religious landscape and the political landscape. And it was very disturbing to me because I discovered that politics and religion were hand and glove. They were just going together. I grew up Baptist, and in the Baptist church that I grew up, we believe that the state is separate from the church. But when I came here and saw that, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? And in the early 2000s, if you remember, George W. Bush was the president of the United States of America. And after the 9/11 attack on the US, the United States, under his leadership, under false pretext of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, invaded that country. I remember specifically how I was sweating like, you can't do that. But who was I? But there's something that struck me very dearly. Oh, it was very disturbing to me. When the US invaded Iraq in what they call shock and awe over Iraq, the president of the United States, George W. Bush Jr., said that freedom is not only America's gift to the world, it is God's gift to the world. I just about flipped. Which implied that America's imperialistic democratic advancement, if anybody actually knows what democracy is equated to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I just couldn't stand that. That is why I said, no, I'm going to put on my thoughts in a book. And I looked through history, especially Christian history, vis-a-vis the Bible. And then I realized that what was going on, that union of church and state, was not just something that began with him or that began with Ronald Reagan or that began particularly in 1976, but it is something that began way back in the 3rd century AD. That it started with Constantine. In fact, actually in my book, I have argued that what we call Christianity has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. Oh, what did you say? Yes. If you know the history and you know the Bible, you will know that what was started in the 3rd century AD by Constantine, well, it was called Christianity, but it was not what Jesus had started. You look in the book of Acts, the followers of Jesus were called the Way or the sect of the Nazarene. But the devil struck a deal with the church, or literally invaded the church in the person of Constantine, and all the Germanic and Romanic paganism invaded the church. I have carefully delineated that in this book. And if you really want to understand what is going on in America at this moment, you have to go all the way back and study even the entire scriptures. In fact, I went all the way back to Samuel and Saul and David, trying to delineate the distinction between the spiritual and the political. So I wrote these things down. Again, I know I'm redundant here. I've already told you that in previous videos. I wrote this down 20 years ago. But it's like a playbook or, or a manuscript on what is going on in America in particular and around the world, because I did not only write about America. So is America a Christian nation or not? We just got down on the section on racism. And this one I said, in the foundation of America, there were voices in the wilderness. So in the darkest corner of evil, there's always light. God always makes sure that the light should shine. In this section, I don't know how far I'm going to go. I'm hoping to make it up to 50 or 54 minutes for this video. There are two people that I want to highlight here during the foundation of America who stood for the light, who opposed the stealing of the land from the people, who opposed the enslavement of the Africans that were brought here. Yes, these were Europeans. And you are also going to be shocked that the pilgrims that everybody say, yeah, they were Christian, they founded the Christian nation. The Puritans, they also persecuted biblical Christianity, or persecuted people who wanted to follow the Bible closely. So I say here, voices in the wilderness. John chapter 1 verses 4 to 5 says, in him, that's Jesus Christ, was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. With all this darkness that surrounds us, there is a light, who is Jesus, and that light is shining through the Word of God. My question to you is, have you ever even read through the Bible? If you haven't, don't say you're following Jesus. It's impossible for a surgeon to be a surgeon and doesn't have a handbook of surgery. How can that be? Or to be a pharmacist and not have a handbook of drugs. So if you claim to follow Jesus, if you claim to be a believer, I challenge you to humble yourself. Read through the Bible so that you can have the big picture and not always have to listen. So I say here that God always ensures that He shines light where there is darkness and evil. It does not always take a crowd for Him to shine that light. One individual, as my brother is fond of saying, one with the Lord is the majority. One individual or just a few are sufficient for Him to witness to the wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their evil behavior. Yes, these people who founded the United States of America, the colonies, they suppressed the truth of the humanity of the native people and the people that they enslaved. Just like in South America, there were in North America those who objected to the Europeans' treatment of the Indians and the encroachment on his land and the treatment of black slaves. Through these individuals, God continued to bear witness during the darkness that prevailed so that the perpetrators were without excuse. Now we're dealing with the foundation of America in which many people who believe or propound that America is a Christian nation, they say, yeah, it was founded as such. But now we're going to the roots. I had to go to the roots when I was writing this book in 2004 to say, but is that true? Not really. The first person's name here is Roger Williams. So even though the Puritans sought religious freedom for themselves, they were intolerant to any person who disagreed with them. Roger Williams not only wanted religious freedom, that is liberty of conscience in matters pertaining to God, which is worship, meaning that government cannot and should not attempt to meddle with religion or to coerce people to worship. We have seen that coercion with the tragic assassination of this young man here in the United States, where it is like, if you don't speak positive of it, then you don't really belong. People, this is an old game, as old as 1,700 years. So he says, Roger Williams not only wanted religious freedom, but a very pure and strict church. He strongly believed that the land belonged to the Indians and therefore that the colonial enterprise was unjust and illegal. Listen very carefully. Illegal. Now we cry a lot about people to be illegal immigrants. The first immigrants who founded the United States of America were illegal immigrants. As a result of such views, in bracket, perceived as dangerous to the colonialists, he was rejected in the first Puritan colony of Massachusetts. Then I quote another. Making friends with the neighboring Indians, he concluded that the land belonged to them and not to the king or the Massachusetts Bay Company. The colonial government, considering Williams a dangerous man, decided to deport him, but he escaped. Oh wow, deportation is not new. It is not new. His flight was in the winter. And I say here in brackets, and his persecutors did not care whether he would freeze to death. And he spent about 14 weeks in the cold. This is persecution by the Puritans, the religious founders of America. He eventually, his flight was in the winter, and he spent 14 weeks in the cold. He eventually bought land from the Indians. He bought the land from the Indians and founded Providence that led to the founding of Rhode Island. So Rhode Island was founded by a person who purchased the land. He did not steal the land. William also advocated complete freedom of worship in contrast to the Puritans, who had strict religious laws abiding on all citizens of the colony. That is religion and politics together. But is that right? Is that biblical? No. So he advocated for absolute separation of church and state. And I want you to understand that even that idea of the separation of church and state did not come from Jefferson or the founding fathers. This was already enshrined in documents in America by Roger William, who, as I've said, opposed the stealing of the land and the enslavement of the Africans. I say here, thus, he was able to discern this Constantinian unholy alliance that plunged Europe into such religious wars, chaos, and apostasy. Now, you see me, I mentioned Constantine in the introduction. This marriage of church and state, or politics and religion, began with Constantine. And I'm not going to go ahead of myself. Concerning the Puritans, who merged civil authority with ecclesiastical authority, someone has quoted, he declared that Puritans in the colony erred in granting the civil authorities power to enforce those commandments that had to do with an individual's relation with God. And I say other dissenters like the Baptists, unfortunately, hello Baptist, you are not welcome in this land. But now you have rejected your union, your belief in separation of church and state, and you are in bed with politicians. I say other dissenters like the Baptist, who followed in William's footsteps and belief system, were equally persecuted by the Puritans. Wherever you see religion and the state united together, there is persecution of true believers. We are right there right now. And I actually wrote this in this book, that it was coming, and it has come 20 years later. The second person we're going to examine here is William Penn, after whom Pennsylvania is named, was an outstanding and prominent Quaker, another dissenting group from England. He was a strong defendant of religious freedom and tolerance. As he sailed to the New World, and I quote here, his purpose was to found a new colony in which there would be complete religious freedom. So what you see evangelicals and MAGA doing, they are actually infringing on religious freedom in America. Why would you suppose that a young man has died? Everybody must accept what he was doing, whether it was wrong or right, before they are regarded as Christian. Why would you require that? To the extent that people would say, if you don't mention the kid, the guy in church, you should leave the church and find another church. People, I'm smiling. I'm smiling because God is smiling. What do you mean by God is smiling? Go to Psalms 2. You will know exactly what I'm saying. These people are raging. And the person who knows the scriptures, and I know the book, I don't only know scriptures, but I did write it down. You will be smiling because you know that the end has come. Like the dragon in Revelation 12. In fact, during the funeral of this young man, somebody said the dragon has arisen. I'm like, people, come on, come on. Right from the horse's own mouth, they are giving you clues that the dragon of Revelation chapter 12 is persecuting the true followers of Christ. Well, like I said, you don't need to be persuaded. You don't need to be persuaded. He said his goal was unlike the other colonies that were founded as religious states. The colonies were founded as religious states, just like there was state religion in Europe, the Church of England, the Anglican, state church in Germany, and all these places. And you know that there was a lot of persecution that went through in these places. And there was a lot of wars of religion, over and over. Study the history of Europe in terms of, just study the history of Europe and you see how much warfare was waged in there, in the name of religion. It has not gone anywhere. I am like, will the Western man ever actually understand the Bible? The Constantinian gangrene, again I'm going ahead of myself. I say his goal was unlike the other colonies that were founded as religious states and marked by religious intolerance. Pennsylvania, following the example of Rhode Island, practiced religious freedom. The religious intolerance of the colonies often led to persecution. It is here already. I'm not going to say it's coming. When I wrote this book, I said it's coming. It's here already. Oh yeah, MAGA persecution, evangelical persecution. Wow. Quakers were persecuted, condemned to exile, and even mutilated and executed. The two Williams advocated for freedom of worship and hence separation of church and state. Now, I'm going to skip a section here which talks about the fact that America was basically transplanted Englishmen, and there were many other European people that came here, like the Germans, the French, and the Dutch, who founded New Amsterdam. There was New Amsterdam, New York, and all of these were absorbed by the English, and then it was basically an English colony. And so we have the United States of America. Now, the founding of the USA, and I quote something here: the United States of America is the second beast in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 11, which says, "Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven, atomic bombs exploding from heaven to earth in full view of men." We have seen that, right? Whether it's atomic bomb over Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or Operation Desert Storm in 1991, or Operation Iraqi Freedom, or Shock and Awe over Baghdad. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, full view of men. Television, we have it. So I continue here and say that the colonies that settled America finally rejected British royal crown and constituted themselves as the United States of America. Thus, the 13 colonies that settled the east coast of North America decided and founded a tiny nation then that would become big and great and would surpass every nation and empire that ever existed on planet Earth. That's America. Her influence would be felt to every corner of the globe. That nation was to become a beacon of freedom, unlike any other that ever existed in the world, and would ultimately lead the world into an advanced stage of civilization. Deja vu. I'm not denying that. That's just the reality. It would become a magnet for immigrants from the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. The rest is history that cannot be told here. You know it, and you can read it. I am concerned here with the prophetic destiny of this great nation. I want to remind you that I wrote this 2004 to 2006. And as you look around now and I read these things, you're like, oh, how did you get those insights? Well, people, let me tell you, I do read the Bible and I do understand the panorama of the biblical story, how it is unfolding, and how it would end. In fact, I actually also covered that at the end of this book. But again, I'm focusing here so that you can see that what MAGA, evangelicals, and Trump are doing is apostasy. It has nothing to do with the Bible. It has nothing to do with the Christ of the Bible. It is at its core anti-Christ. Now, continue here, says prophecy is not history, although it gives a panorama of man's entire history. Daniel, that's Prophet Daniel, was given a picture of the distant future that revealed the end of the Roman Empire and eventually Europe, her daughter nations, and the rest of the world. Human civilization as we have it now. John, the Revelator, that's the author of the book of Revelation, also saw the panorama of Western civilization in its final glory and fall. We are there at that fall. The final glory has been here, and the tipping point already started since 2020, and it's just going slowly down. John describes two beasts, that is, empires or kingdoms, in Revelation 13. By the way, let me just tell you plainly, the dragon or Satan or the devil is empire. If you're for empire, you are a dragonian. You are not a Christian. You're not a believer. You are for this world. And the God of this world is empire, is Satan, is the devil, is dragon. I hope you actually understood what I just said. The first beast, as we have seen, is Rome or Europe, and is identical to or is identified as the dragon or Satan. This beast is described as having come out of the peoples or of the sea, which is peoples. That is, Rome or Europe rose as an empire from the ruins of previous empires. But the second beast is described as coming out of the earth. Thus, this refers to a significant world empire that would come into existence on a new land not previously occupied by an empire. This second beast is directly connected to the first beast, as it exercises the authority of the first beast. The only significant world power that has existed after the Roman Empire that fits these descriptions is the United States. She eventually became a colonial power like other European nations, the eighth of the seven, Revelation chapter 7 verse 11, and much more an imperialistic one at that. So America has been a colonial nation and an imperial nation even now as we speak. More than 700 military bases around the world in more than 70 countries. That's imperialism at its finest. Another significant characteristic of this beast is that it has two horns like a lamb. The New Testament uses the imagery of lamb to refer to the meek and innocent Jesus Christ. The lamb likeness refers to the meek, gospel-loving, and innocence of the beast, that's USA, at her founding. In a nutshell, it is not an overstatement to say that the Puritans were pioneers or founders of America. You know, though they came 13 years after the settlement of the Virginia Company. I mean, there can be a lot of discussion to that, and I've discussed a few things to that regarding that as well, because in 1607, the first expeditions and the second and the third that came before the Puritans were joint stock companies that were seeking for profit, which is the true foundation of the nation. But I mean, the Puritans came later. We will not discount that fact, even though they persecuted true believers. Oh, this is difficult to say. I said, though they came 13 years after the settlement of the Virginia Company, it is an historical mistake to talk or refer to the founders of the USA, implying only those who fought the War of Independence and united the 13 colonies. The early settlers of the colonies basically founded religious communities or states, both Protestant and Catholic, though not exclusively. Maryland was a Catholic, or the land of Mary was a Catholic state. Whether these communities or colonies were ideal in their religious practices or not, it is clear that they were Christian, in quote-unquote Christian communities in a sense. Thus, these humble beginnings gave America the semblance of a lamb. He looks like Jesus. Horns also represent powers and could very well stand for the two power structures, Protestantism and Republicanism. And full stop, I'm sorry about that. One would wish that the description only ended here with the lamb, but it doesn't. Unfortunately, this beast, although having two horns like a lamb, unlike a lamb, spoke like a dragon. How is this possible? The religious face of America, somewhere along the line, gradually gave way to the dragon face. Dragon. and I put something here in quotes. I say, it is my contention that by the Declaration of Independence, America began to develop the characteristics of a dragon. Now they were becoming an empire. An empire is dragon. If you know what dragon is Satan. So it was becoming in status just like any other empire, clearly discernible from the fact that the state was separate from the religious institutions. So by the time that the USA was founded in 1776, there was a clear distinction between the division between the religious and the political. That has not been the case in the state. Well, somebody can argue, well, the state still maintained the religious and political union. Okay, but the nation per se did not do that. And we will see why or how. And then I say, ever since, the Republic as a secular and political entity has increasingly drawn closer to the dragon until it now speaks like the dragon. First, I would like to ask, now what we're trying to work out here is America a Christian nation or not? That's what we're trying to answer. First, I would like to ask, was the empire or nation founded on July 4th, 1776? Well, that's the date given, not the actual one. Was it a child of the Protestant Reformation, the Puritan Reformation in England, or the Enlightenment? It cannot be denied that the genius of the America's founding fathers gave birth to the best political entities since the dawn of civilization, and the prominence of the USA today attests to that fact. However, while these men are revered, venerated, and even worshipped, we must not overlook the precursors to their genius. The political philosophy of the New Republic was not an American genius. Pay attention to that. It was a product of European political philosophers derived purely from reason. if you are listening to this, and you are one of the people who believes that America was founded as a Christian nation, I want to read this statement to you again. And I want you to disprove it. Go into history, relate to scripture, and then disprove what I've said. I said the political philosophy of the new republic, that is the United States of America, was not an American genius. It was a product of European political philosophers derived purely from reason, not from scripture. So don't lie to yourself. Well, you are actually free to lie to yourself. When you know that all liars don't make their way into the kingdom of God. You know that, right? John Locke, one of the British Enlightenment thinkers, had argued strongly for the natural rights of human beings, which are life, liberty, and property. This is the philosophy of John Locke, purely from reason, not from scripture. Do you want me to read that again? I'm sorry about my attitude. Please. It's just insane that people would just drag something from philosophers, from enlightenment that had nothing to do with the Bible and start saying, oh, America was founded as a Christian nation. America was founded as a Christian nation. Zero. The rights of man purported here. Well, and then in the preamble of the Constitution, they say, and nature's God. Well, John Locke was not talking about nature's God. This is syncretism at its finest. When you try to drag pagan philosophies and wrap it with biblical teaching and say, oh, this is what the Bible teaches, it is called syncretism, and it is very destructive. The destruction of America at this moment as I speak is due to the inability of those who call themselves Christians to be able to distinguish the fact that the United States was founded as a secular state based on Enlightenment philosophy and not the Bible. The inability to do that distinction is why we're in this chaos that we are in today. Why MAGA is doing what it's doing. Why America has apostatized and why America will fall. If nobody listens to me, I will keep saying this. But at the end, you will see that my craziness was not that crazy at all anyway. Well, you know that Jesus was called crazy, right? Let me read that again. So John Locke, one of the British Enlightenment philosophers, had argued strongly for the natural rights of human beings, which are life, liberty, and property. He also argued that the powers of the government, however, whether monarchical or popular, are strictly limited. No government may violate the individual's right to life, liberty, and property. If it does, if that government does that, the people who set it up can and should overthrow it. Another Enlightenment political philosopher, Baron de Montesquieu, that's French, reflecting on the current monarchies of Europe then, suggested that since power corrupts, government should be exercised by three powers that will balance and limit each other: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So what you have to understand is that MAGA Christianity and evangelicals for Trump don't have any clue what the Constitution of the United States is based on. These things are here. Now, let me not cut myself. This Enlightenment political philosophy was the inspiration of the American patriots, especially Thomas Jefferson, who wrote many of Locke's ideas into the Declaration of Independence, frequently using his exact words. They likewise appear in the United States Constitution. The Constitution of the United States is an Enlightenment document that derives from reason, not the Bible. Come on, American Christians. Wake up. Don't try to deceive people. I said this Enlightenment political philosophy was the inspiration of the American patriots, especially Thomas Jefferson. What Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence and much of the Constitution was not his genius. It was not his brain. And you worship the guy as if he's anything. He was an adulterer anyway. He slept with his slave in the slave quarters. These people are venerated and worshipped. Their gods. Again, on July 4th, this is a quotation here. Again, on July 4th, 1776, Congress issued the Declaration of Independence, the work of Thomas Jefferson, one of the radical leaders. Its magnificent preamble, leaning heavily on the political philosophy of John Locke and the European disciples of Enlightenment, stated in strong words the doctrines of natural rights and government by contract. Government by contract. I don't think the masses know that when government goes amok, they have the right to overthrow it and to institute and even bring up a constitution that will, I don't know what I'm saying. I know what I'm saying, but I'm going to run my mouth into trouble. Government by contract. Government is not eternal. It may remain as long as it is doing what it is contracted to do. Given this evidence, would anyone with a functioning brain say that the nation founded was Christian? I question the level of your intelligence and I question the level of your reasoning capacity if you say that the United States of America was founded as a Christian nation when it is evident from the Constitution and the preamble of the Constitution that it was founded based on the philosophy of Enlightenment philosophical thinkers who derived all that they said from reason, not the Bible. They don't even come close to quoting the book. I question your intelligence and I question your level of reasoning. There is neither explicit quotes from the Bible nor anything to suggest the inclusion of Christianity. Enlightenment and natural law, which is the religion of these people, which was deism, were the brainchild and the blueprint for the republic. Let me read that for you again. Enlightenment and natural law were the brainchild and blueprint of the republic. To suggest that the documents of the republic are Christian because of the mention of nature's God or creator is to say that Africa south of the Sahara was Christian before the arrival of the missionaries because they believed in a creator God. Come on, people. To make such a conclusion is to commit spiritual, academic, and historical suicide. And let me tell you, if you happen to listen to this and you believe that America is a Christian nation, you are committing spiritual, academic, and historical suicide. Much has been said about the religion of America's founding fathers. And those who argue that the republic was founded as a Christian nation popularize it a lot. Like in the case of Constantine, no one stands as judge of another's fate, but by their fruits we can understand them. Source after source indicates that some of the prominent founding fathers were Freemasons, including the first president of the Republic, and others were deists. We know Freemasons have a high disregard for the deity of Christ. They have a disregard for the fact that Christ is God in human flesh. Freemasons, to the core, are anti-Christ. I'll say that again. Freemasons, to the core, are anti-Christ. I say anyone who dabbles with the deity of Christ is called anti-Christ. 1 John 2, 22 to 23 and 1 John 4, 2 to 3. Thomas Jefferson, now listen, my dear founding fathers, founding faith of the founding fathers, listen to me. Thomas Jefferson's disdain for the supernatural, that is Jesus' divinity and miracle. Thomas Jefferson was a hardcore anti-Christ. Hardcore. And he was the brainchild of the preamble and Constitution of the United States. And then somebody will stand here and baptize the document and say it was a Christian document. Come on, people. You can't be this blind. You can't be this ignorant. But you know, where ignorance is bliss, it is folly to be wise. So Thomas Jefferson's disdain for the supernatural, that is Jesus' divinity and miracles, has been clearly noted, but he was the most radical leader of the revolution and a major contributor to the early documents. Another thing to note is that to acknowledge religion does not necessarily mean to be born again, just like Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God but still went ahead to erect an idolatrous statue for his kingdom. Any experienced politician in a religious community would consider it expedient to consider the religion of the people. A proper understanding. Now, okay, here's a big one. A proper understanding of the cult of Freemasonry is mandatory for anyone who wants to understand the origins, the Christian origins of the American Republic. It is mandatory for you to study the cult of Freemasonry if you want to understand anything about the founding of America and the founding fathers of America. It is mandatory. Boy, I was crazy. I had just lived here for 3.5 years, and I was sick and tired of hearing that argument again and again. I went into the historical document, the America's historical document, and what did I find there? Ooh. Freemasonry, occultism, deism. I don't have the statistics here. Like, I think about more than 80% of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were slaveholders, and many of them were Freemasons. So I said a proper understanding of the cult of Freemasonry is mandatory for anyone who wants to understand the Christian origins of the American Republic. To say, of course, that the Republic was a brainchild of the Enlightenment is not to disregard the fact that Christianity also played a strong influence. The rule of law that basically keeps the nation on a successful path was a contribution of Calvinistic theology as practiced by the Puritans. To be sure, there were many Christian men involved in the founding of the nation and in the writing of the early documents. Now, understand what I'm saying here? It's not like Christians were totally excluded, but the document per se had nothing to do with Christianity. However, for the Republic per se, state religion was disestablished when the Union was founded. The Republic had no legislated national religion. The Republic had no legislated national religion. This was good both for the Republic and Christianity, and the First Amendment on the Bill of Rights ensured that this would be the case. Any deviation from this at any point will harm the cause of both the Republic and Christianity. In fact, it could invoke divine displeasure. My dear people, let me calm down. Let me read that phrase to you again. Like I'm saying, you know the religious landscape right now in America. You know where it's going. You know how many are disillusioned with Christianity because of how it is being used as a political tool. Like I said, this is not something new. It started 1,700 years ago in AD 311, 312 to be precise. And even how it has become this way in the US, the history is right there. I think I have it here, and I'm not going to go ahead into explain that right now. But let me read this to you again. I said that, so there was no legislative religion when the Republic was founded. I said this was good both for the Republic and Christianity. And the First Amendment on the Bill of Rights ensured that this would be the case. Then I say, any deviation from this at any point would harm the cause of both the Republic and Christianity. What we're seeing now, America as a nation is being destroyed, and Christianity as a religion is being destroyed because misguided Christians, whatever Christian means, are trying to bring that, have merged that together. And it was Bush, it was Reaganism, it was Bushism, and now it's Trumpism. So what is going on now? Trump did not start it. He just came to conclude and finish the deal. Republicanism. Okay, now I'll run it up here. Republicanism is, of course, as old as the Greek city-state and philosophers, and as old as Rome. The distinctive feature of American republicanism is that it was and is attached to the wealthy. Now is the crescendo. Listen carefully. Now, everybody today is saying, and it is true, that all congressmen and the senators and the president all have corporations that support them, and hence their leadership and legislative, whatever they do, has to please these corporate donors. This is not a new thing. It has been there from the beginning. It's just that the poor people, both white and black, don't want to understand the game that the devil is playing, or to actually understand that the United States of America is a big company and that it has smaller companies that run it. Oh my. I'm saying too much. Okay. Not too much. So say here, the distinctive feature of American republicanism is that it was and is attached to the wealthy, to whom franchise was limited from the start. Far from being a government of the nobility, it is a government of the elite, the rich and strong, property owners from the start. A government for the elites by the elite. The word democracy is just a veneer for this elitist governance or republicanism. I made a trip to Washington, D.C. in 2022, and I learned a lot of things. Going to the beginnings, the first street, and I went to Jamestown and all those places. And what I learned right there in Jamestown was that the first Continental Congress, the people that had to attend, number one, you had to be Anglo-Saxon white male. Remember, you had to be white, you had to be male, you had to be Protestant, you had to be at least 21 years old, and you had to be a property owner. Fool you! The nation was founded by elites for elites and has been tied to the wealthy. wake up. That's it. From the beginning. And they use the poor to get there. Have always. That's why I told you that empire is Satan. Elite as Satan is. I hope my video makes it. This political philosophy was encapsulated in Alexander Hamilton's doctrine. He was aristocratic in his political philosophy and was convinced that what the new nation needed most was order, and that only a powerful central government based on the support of people of wealth could provide that order. Ha 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 ha. Fooled you, fooled you. The American government is a government of the elite, for the elite, by the elite. And they co-opt the middle class to think that we are part of it. And this doctrine was right there in the beginning. So don't whine and say, oh, corporations, oh, big pharma is giving money. No, that's what it was set up to be, and will always be like that until the end. Until now. So he fashioned a national economic policy intended to favor the wealthy and to tie their interests to a strong central government. That philosophy is still well and alive in the Republic today. The poor and the commoner cannot and will never mount the throne. We're going to run it up here. And then next, we're going to still answer the question, per se, indirectly now. Now, we'll answer the question, was America founded as a Christian nation? Now, we'll actually answer the question, the USA, Christian or not? Now, you can know these facts. Well, this will help you to understand what is going on. I wrote these facts by reflecting in the Bible, because I know Jesus, because I know the truth, because I know God. If you want to be wise, surrender to Jesus. You will be wiser than me, because I'm getting old. Yeah, well, that's your old age is wisdom. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we're going to continue in this journey so that we can fully understand what is going on in America today with MAGA, with Trump, and with Christianity, and with Charlie Kirkism, and people. I have understanding, and I want you to have understanding. Thank you, and goodbye.